lesz 2 előadás a Te is programról ma délután. Azzal fejeződik be a Magyar Nemzetközi Konferencia a minőségi testnevelésről. És ahhoz, hogy el tudjuk kezdeni ezt a kerekasztal beszélgetést, én rögtön kérem is kollégámat, Boronyai Zoltán urat a Magyar Diáksport Szövetségtől, hogy mint a kerekasztal beszélgetés moderátora jöjjön föl a színpadra, és akkor szólítanám a vendégeket, a kerekasztal beszélgetés résztvevőit. Köztük dr. Csányi Tamás urat, a Magyar Diáksport Szövetség iskolai testnevelés osztályának a vezetőjét. Szintén kérem dr. Molnár László urat, a Magyar Diáksport Szövetség szakmai igazgatóját, hogy tartson velünk. Kérem Gregory J. Welket, a Intézet Fitnessgram tudományos igazgatóját. Catherine Vowell-t, szintén a Intézet Fitnessgram igazgató úrhölgyét. Kevin Finn urat, az Észak-Iowai Egyetem Fitnessgram tanácsadóját, valamint Weimo Zsu urat, a Intézet képviseletében. A téma pedig nem más, mint a NETFIT nemzetközi lehetőségei a következő bő másfél órában. És ugye a kerekasztal beszélgetésnek az egyik része az, hogy kérdezni is lehet, arra is lesz majd lehetőség, ha minden igaz.
Catherine and gentlemen, thank you for accepting our invitation. We are going to speak about fitness levels, fitness measurement systems, and just for kind of setting the mood for the conversation, the discussion, the first question is very easy. Could you tell me what is the most relevant tendency or the most relevant development in fitness level measurement systems in the last decade or last 20 years within your practice and experience?
I guess if you're describing what's the biggest change in what we're doing, I think it would be the internet and the capability of interacting with data. And so Fitnessgram has had an interesting history. Maybe that's interesting for the audience as well. So when the Cooper Institute first started doing Fitnessgram, teachers used to send printed data sets that could be scanned and put into a mega computer that filled up a whole room. Then that transitioned into the desktop station with the Apple IIe or some of the early computers, and then that moved into network computing and then onto the web. And the interesting thing is now the data, at least from a lot of the US schools, is all back in servers in that same room at the Cooper Institute on cloud servers. So it's a really interesting history about that. But I'd say in terms of what the impact on schools and teachers, it would be the technology developments that have allowed the exchange of information that way.
Catherine?
I would say from the school perspective that having a reliable and objective measure to really help the field embrace health-related fitness and ensure that it is a component of the quality physical education program and not just sport-focused is having something that we can really use to interact with the students and their families when it comes to the amount of fitness needed for good health for their students.
Weimo?
Now, I see there are really two very interesting parts. One is the major shift from performance fitness to the health-related fitness. For a long time, I think that originally really the performance. In fact, if you're looking back at history, especially my background in China, in the early days, it's really prepared young men to fight, for the Cold War. In the system in China, the original one in the US, the same purpose, really. And then started from the 80s and realized that the Cold War is finished and the childhood obesity is increased, and then maybe start to focus on health. So that's, to me, is one of the major shift change. The second one will be from the normal reference to the criteria reference. So I think the Eurofit, for example would be find the normal population, find the mean percentile, and based on that, do the evaluation. But the philosophy there is you select the faster, taller, stronger ones, and you really focus on top percentile. But when we have this population is get not fit, really is low percentile in the good people who will have potential become a fit adults and have a lot higher cost for the medical care. So that shift to the the criteria reference. What is a 9 years old boy should run, and when they grow up will be, less health risk, and a lot Dr. Cooper's data to support develop this kind of criteria. So I think that to me is two major ones.
That is certainly a huge step and huge a change in the outcomes and the goals within fitness level measurement. Kevin.
This is, again, to refer to the global concept. I think the adoption of the PACER has been a really good and a keen development. I know it's not new and probably obviously not within the last decade, but just looking at it from the teacher's perspective, that it can be done indoors. There's obviously class management is easier, and of course it's been validated very well compared to the aerobic capacity in the laboratory has been really good. So I think it's a strong, easy to administer, and also very valid test. So I just like the fact that there's more recognition of the PACER in a global sense.
That's absolutely a huge part of the NETFIT as well, and all the VO2 measurements. Tamás?
Thank you, but please let me speak in Hungarian, okay? So, for the audiences. Én azt hiszem, hogy Magyarországra vetítve ez a bizonyos változás, ez most rendkívül szignifikánsá vált, és rendkívül jelentős lesz, hogy egy teljesen más rendszerre állunk rá fittségmérési szempontból, mint az eddigiekben, mind pedagógiai elképzelés szempontjából, mint maguk a tesztek szempontjából, és a teszteknek az értékelése szempontjából, ami azt hiszem, hogy nagyon fontos, mint a gyerekek szempontjából, mint pedig a pedagógusok irányából, és hogyha egy picit elővehetem a saját tapasztalatainkat, amit a NETFIT méréseken és a már leképzett 5000, közel 5000, vagy már talán túl is vagyunk az 5000 képzett tanító és testnevelő kollégánkon, aki hát most már szeptemberben a NETFIT-et használja a bemeneti méréseinél. Nagyon jók a visszajelzések abban a tekintetben, hogy ezek az új tesztek, amik lényegében ugyanazokat a képességeket, fittségi összetevőket mérik, mint amit a korábbi tesztek, mint az Eurofit vagy éppen a Hungarofit, egy picivel motiválóbbak. Mondhatnám, sokkal motiválóbbak. Gondolok itt például a 20 méteres ingafutás tesztre, ahol ha valaki megnézi egy csoportnak a működését, amivel persze egy picit meg kell tanulni, minden tesztet meg kell tanulni ahhoz, hogy valaki ezt jól és megbízhatóan csinálja, de ez igenis segíti azt, hogy a gyerekek bekapcsolódjanak és élvezzék, amit csinálnak, hiszen egy zenére futva, hangjelzésekre kell folyamatosan egy távolságot megtenni együtt, azonos sebességgel. Nem az történik, mint egy 2000 méteres futásnál, vagy egy 12 perces futásnál, hogy az elején állnak a legjobbak, a végén ott kullognak a leglassabbak, aztán a motiváció tudjuk, hogy milyen óriási befolyással bír ezeknek az eredményeknek a megbízhatóságára. Tehát azt gondolom, hogy sokkal objektívebbek azok a mérések, amelyeket a fitnessgramból adaptálunk, gondolva itt például még a hasprés tesztre, vagy az ütemezett hasizom tesztre, amiben elléptünk a hagyományos felüléstől, védjük a gerincet, és a mérőcsíkkal pedig egy standard végrehajtást kértünk. Tehát az a véleményem és az a tapasztalatunk, hogy a magyar gyerekek számára is ez egy újszerű, érdekes és adott esetben motiváló tesztrendszerré tud válni.
We heard in a couple of lessons and introductions that criteria reference is something new, and well, not new, but something is working better compared to other systems. Could you lead us into it a little bit more from a professional point of view? Why is that so important? Why is that helpful when your goal is to increase the health behavior and the health-oriented lifestyle and life management? Probably Dr. Zhu.
Yeah, again, the older days we tend to use the norms. So when you do the norms, it's relatively easy. You get a national sample, and you get a mean, you get a standard deviation, you can calculate a percentile. But the problem is you have assumption that the population have to be healthy. Otherwise, we'll only use the norm. We'll say you are average, you are above average, below the average. But if a population overall is not fit, in like the U.S. situation, a lot of kids, 60% the obese, then the average have really no meaning. Therefore, I think the criterion and the absolute standard. So the normal reference really is relative. So compare the 9 years boy their peers, where this kid's performance is located. So that's really just related to the other kids. It's not related to any specific meaning. 9 minutes running or 20 sit-up tests, so what? So now the thing, we try to do, the US is really shift to the connect the health. So it's health related, and then really try to say, well, 4 and 9 years old, if we do sit-up tests, should do 10 or do 20 or 30. So build that standard. And interestingly that, that's much challenge compared to do a normal reference standard or the relative standard. Criterion really is absolute standard. And the first part of work is really based on the Dr. Cooper's data derived from the dots. Say, okay, dots, they should have 35 millimeter per minute kg will to max. And then, for 9 years old or 10 years, how much they have. But recently, I think that we have the younger kids also show some health problem, and Greg and we have a team also did the body composition to verify some standard, developed in the US. It's really last 30 years. I think it's one of the major shift. I think also make the fitness gram very solid scientific is a lot of research back up that cutoff scores. So,
well, when we're talking about criteria reference, that it requires to have standards, my question is that setting the standards, was it a difficult thing to do, or just needed a given amount of data that you can lean onto as a scientist, or how was the process with this, Greg or Kevin?
Right.
I'm not sure, Greg.
Well, we've gotten better at linking the data to health standards, and that's partially because better data is available. So when FitnessGram started, we did use health-related standards from the beginning, but then as new data sets became available, we can be more precise in our determination of a potential health risk, and that's what allowed us with both aerobic capacity and body composition to have what we call 3 zones. It's really 2 thresholds, but that allows us to say with confidence that if kids are in the healthy fitness zone, they have low risk of metabolic syndrome, and if they're in the below the needs improvement zone, they do have a potential risk. The middle zone is kind of a buffer. They don't have high risk, but they also aren't where we want them to be. So that's why we call it some risk, and we want kids to all move up to the healthy fitness zone. I guess the one aspect I was going to add to Weimu's comment about the standards is health-related standards allow all children to be successful and kind of de-emphasizes the competition and performance. And so that's consistent with what we call the HELP philosophy in FitnessGram, that health is available to everyone for a lifetime and it's personal. So each child gets a report of their own health standards, and I guess what makes them difficult to develop is that they're age and gender specific. So we know that boys and girls develop at different ages and mature differently, and so we have to take that into account when we're setting the standards.
Am I add a few things? I think that it's really very challenging, in fact, setting the health-related standards, because you get also many different health outcomes. Right now we use a lot cardiovascular endurance as outcome, and that's based on Dr. Cooper's data. But what about the bone? What is bone health, and what about mental health too? So there's really many different health outcome variables, can be used as cutoff scores. But at the same time, I think that we set the physical activity, the requirement says 30 minutes moderate physical activity. It sounds like all different the research all go that direction. I expect that as we accumulate more the scientific research, maybe we'll find that, it's about the same, that amount of fitness maybe apply to different health outcome variables too.
That's definitely an interesting point of view, dividing health parts that could be examined partially. Catherine?
I was just going to mention briefly, back to the original question, I think having criterion reference standards for use by the physical education department within a school or within a school system really puts it at an equal playing field as the other disciplines within a school, and lifts it up as a discipline. And when you show the data to school boards or those decision makers, you have, it's much more impactful because it is criterion referenced.
That's going to mean something. What was during the evolution of standards, what was the biggest change or the biggest data you had to, a standard you had to correct based on the given amount of data? Was there any, for example, the PACER test, you had to cut it back or just...
I would say the 2010 standards was such a milestone.
Yeah, I think what we were able in 2010 to reevaluate, again, the aerobic capacity and body composition and really link them very powerfully to health standards. The interesting thing is our analyses sort of confirmed some earlier estimates that were really made by Kirk Cureton, one of our scientific advisors, using original data, again, from Dr. Cooper's database of what a healthy amount for adults is, but extrapolated down by age and gender, and our health standards empirically were derived to be very close to those. So that was a key, I think, accomplishment in that regard. One challenge I think we have, as Weimu kind of brought up, is that some of the tests don't have as strong of a link with health, and actually flexibility is an interesting one, because a lot of research is showing that, you know, flexibility has some, you know, counter effects on health or performance, and so the field is still in flux a little bit about how to interpret flexibility and how it links to health. We have very little evidence that it links to low back pain, for example, but yet we know that stretching is important for, you know, flexibility, muscle health, and other things. So the link to health outcomes is weaker, but there are other ways of setting what we call criterion reference standards. So the linking to a health outcome is one way, but there's other methods, one called the contrasting groups method, and, you know, Weimu can maybe describe more in detail of other methods of setting a criterion standard.
Well, Kevin?
Yeah.
Let me just make a comment. I think it's a reference to the first question, or the second, Weimu did. When you deal with obesity kids that are overweight, actually, and of course, maybe the pediatricians are involved, I have to believe that the criterion standards really sell well. Just the statistics involved with specificity and sensitivity is really from a clinical model. And I think that's really sells well. And if you're dealing with pediatricians, I think it's important, and coming from a physical education where they may not always get the credibility for their discipline, all of a sudden it's just stepped it up. So I think the fact that it's being administered in a physical education environment, but yet it has the same criterion that maybe a stress test or some other measurement of cardiovascular fitness might be, that's really good. So I just want to make a comment on that.
We've been talking about equipments, what we were using in labor, in lab techniques, and in the schools on the field. And a couple of days ago, I spoke to Greg, and he mentioned that there is a band that should be used in some sort of health-related way. What do you think about the evolution of these equipments that using it in schools? What are the possibilities and the tendencies? Do you have any thought about that?
Sure, if you're referring to like the activity monitors, I'm gathering. So yeah, I think that's a new frontier. All of us within our scientific advisory board have wanted to move the field towards assessing physical activity and promoting activity. Fitness is, you know, easier to measure, and it's what a lot of teachers and administrators have wanted. Yet we still remain very committed to the notion of focusing on physical activity as another key assessment. So I think where we're currently working with that is that a lot of competing technologies exist, and we're working towards systems where the technologies would have access to an API that would allow them to work with the FitnessGram software and enter data directly into an activity log. So we have a built-in activity logging system that would allow children to set their own goals and track their own activity. So if a school chooses monitor A, that may work, and if they choose monitor B, it may work. So we would give schools choices to allow the open competition, if you will, for the technologies to compete for the best solution for school activity monitoring. But I guess to get back to the value of that, I think kids learning self-monitoring and tracking activity is something they have more control over. It's pretty daunting to a child to say, you know, your fitness is not in the healthy fitness zone, you need to do more, and the child very well may be very active and doing all the right things, and just genetically or for some other reason can't move that needle. But activity is more within their control and can reward what they're doing.
I was going to mention the same, especially playing off of what Mr. Disney was talking about yesterday, as far as I think it would improve the focus of it being a student-centered tool, because the student would be responsible for wearing the device. I think a challenge in the field is balancing the accuracy with the compliance. We certainly know that the body-worn devices are more accurate. The wrist cool ones there's a lot higher rate of compliance, and so ensuring that we have the appropriate hardware and, again, as Greg mentioned, having it auto-populate into a software and teachers being able to have that snapshot view of their entire school, class, grade level, et cetera, would really, I think, enhance the teacher's ability to design their programs around their students' needs.
You have a lot of data that goes back to 20 or 30 years ago. Those people were children at that time, or probably parents now. Do you have any data about the tendencies that maybe the children now are a little bit more active or less active, or can you tell me about anything that, because we know we are familiar with that organization Designed to Move, and they show that the numbers are decreasing in terms of activity. But what does your experience say?
I'm not sure there's any longitudinal data of that type. It'd be very interesting to be able to capture that data from kids and see how impacted they were and what their activity pattern is now. Our best data set to do that is our current NFL Play 60 project, where we have longitudinal data for 4 to 5 years, and as we continue that data set, we'll be able to answer some of those questions, both looking at school level factors but also individual factors, and we are capturing activity measures in that sample as well. So I think the challenge in going back 20 or 30 years is that we have very little information on how the data was collected or who to contact, and all their personal records are also confidential, so you'd have to set up kind of a permission system to enable you to track and ask those kids questions later.
Yeah, I think that in general that the old days data may be more questionnaire kind of data, but the Stanford recently just released a study, a longitude study, and they have a lot of diary data, record. And in general, I think that I remember that they said really the older days kids for sure is much active than today, and so that's there is not really like a national representative sample, but the study has followed the people many years and show that it's a after school kids have a lot the walk to school, that kind of activity. So the daily small moderate light physical activity is much higher than today's kids.
And let's say that physical activity promoting program is successful in a school. Do you have any evidence or ever thought about, do you have data about that? Do these children inspire their parents or their community somehow, showing the techniques or even activity monitoring systems or everything? Do you have any experience about that?
That's a loaded question, and I use the word, it's an American culture thing, it's not really a good answer to that. I think physical activity promotion has for years tried to make impact. If you assess, you give them information, you'll make change, and it's not always the case. I think the interventions have been lacking after the assessment, and I can just say that, and somewhat reference to the previous question too, is that parents' involvement or parental influence has not been real favorable. And I speak for a much younger child and a preschool age child, because those parents are not that old. They have not had a good experience. They may not be active themselves. So I think the reality is physical activity promotion in many ways can be altered. And obviously the planning for it, I've always taken the environmental approach as I've decided that it's not a one-to-one intervention. So I guess my take-home message is that we have a lot to work towards on physical activity promotion, and if we say a school-based program, we definitely have to change the environment at the school, and beyond the assessment, we We have to act on, you know, strengths and weaknesses, and of course look at how it might impact the family, which of course then makes a better tie with the parent.
I want to add something really just from my early experience with my son. I feel like it's really depends on the area, depends on the school district, and because you know, my son, you know, our community really works very well, especially after school program, and it's really just the community base. The Friday when there's a football game and the track team, all the time is go there. And you know, the example that my son's high school have about 1,000 students, 500 boys, and about 200 in the track team. You know, track usually is very kind of boring sport, but there's 200 there. They organize so well, and it's really the parents' participation. You know, I remember when we have my son also played the American football, and so one day they have all the father lying on the, you know, the home line. So, you know, football, you get in 7 points, all the father 7 push-ups, and so another 7, 14. And that day we have like a, you know, the 34 somewhere, and some, you know, fat parents, they cannot do it, and then everyone is laughing. The next day, you know, at the shopping malls, you did so bad yesterday. But I saw that as small interaction, involve the parents, involve the, you know, the community. It really works very well. So it's like when they have a game, it's like a festival, and to the town, you know, it's just everyone's there, and to the support. So
I was just going to add, like more in the context of FitnessGram, one of the advantages I think of the FitnessGram report is that it goes to the parents. So I think too often the schools are blamed for, you know, not helping kids be healthy, and they're supposed to be teaching our kids a number of things, and we rely on the schools maybe too much to make them healthy. So if I had the chance, you know, I try to encourage teachers to hold the parents accountable as well. Say, look, I want to help your child as much as I can, but I can only see them these hours. I need you to help them be active after school and open the door and have them go outside or exercise with them. So I think the advantage of the report is it creates that shared responsibility or dialogue that the parent then knows that they have a role. Because maybe generationally, a lot of the parents grew up in an era where they were active and they just were outside, and today's generation comes inside and starts from there, and they need to be nudged outdoors. So.
I was just going to mention that there's evidence-based programs and research to back it up at isolated, you know, individual, you know, maybe school system levels throughout the U.S. The coordinated approach to children's health, the CATCH program, which was very popular in the Southwest, definitely proved to reduce BMI and increase aerobic capacity because it was a coordinated family involvement, nutrition, and physical activity promotion type of program. I would say anything at the national level, probably our best program initiative at the national level would be the Fuel Up to Play 60, so kind of a counterpart to our evaluation project and underneath the entire Play 60 campaign. And so that's definitely a multi-level approach as far as involving our national American football players and promotions on the TV. And then the students see it in their schools, and being part of a Fuel Up program, they have incentives. And so I think our data has shown that there is some movement, more so in the BMI, and maybe that's because they have so much of the nutrition focus. But we, just to answer your original question, I think nationally that would be probably the one flagship program.
Egy hozzátenni valóm lenne még pedig a közösség és a szülőknek a bevonása kapcsán. Ugye Magyarország előtt áll gyakorlatilag egy nagyon komoly kihívás a fitségi tesztek bevezetése területén, hiszen januártól kezdődően jogszabály alapján ugye mérni szükséges a gyerekeknek a fitségi állapotát, és a NETFIT ebben komoly segítséget tud adni, sőt olyannyira, hogy ugye ezzel kell mérnie majd az iskoláknak a fitségi állapotot, de ahhoz, hogy a közösség, a közvetlen közösség, az iskolai környezet el tudja fogadni ezt az új tesztrendszert és ennek az üzenetét, amelyet egyrészt a gyerek is megkap, másrészt pedig a szülő is látni fog és meg fog kapni, ehhez először az első nagy lépés, azt hiszem, közösen kell megtennünk méghozzá, hogy a testnevelő társadalomnak kell befogadnia az új mérési rendszert, és én arról érdeklődnék, ha megengedik nekem itt a közöttünk lévő testnevelő kollégáktól, hogy akinek van tapasztalata, aki részt vett a képzésünkön, aki ne adj Isten már mért a NETFIT-tel bármit, vagy kipróbálta, ha megosztanának, vagy megosztanátok velünk néhány dolgot, akkor ennek szerintem nagyon örülnénk. Köszönöm szépen. Oda viszem a mikrofont, jó?
Pécsről érkeztem, Földvári Zoltán vagyok. Augusztus végén vettem részt ezen a NETFIT-es továbbképzésen. Ott ugye a házi feladat az volt, hogy csináljunk mi is tesztet. Hát ez az első héten nem volt egyszerű, de azért egyet megcsináltunk. Elmondtam a gyerekeknek, hogy más lesz a szemlélet. Ez már alapból nagyon tetszett nekik, hogy hát nem a teljesítmény lesz a lényeg. Bementünk a számtekterembe, DVD-n lejátszottam nekik, ez nagyon-nagyon tetszett, és ezek után csináltuk meg a fekvőtámaszokat. Na most mindenkinek rosszabb lett az eredménye, mint tavaly, tehát ebből az derült ki, hogy valószínűleg ez nehezebb, de mindenki ennek ellenére aktívabb volt. Tehát az is, aki eddig meg sem próbálta gyakorlatilag, az is elkezdte. Tehát én azt láttam, hogy sokkal motiváltabb volt, a gyengébb is, aki ügyes, az meg főleg, hiszen az ő mindig jobbat akar. Hát így ennyi, röviden.
Köszönjük szépen, köszönjük szépen. Esetleg, ha ott még egy következő.
Fekéni Tóth Judit vagyok Miskolcról. Én májusban csináltam meg a továbbképzést, aminek azért örültem, mert nem csak magának a felmérésnek a végrehajtását sajátítottuk el, önmagunkon is kipróbálva, ami nagyon-nagyon érdekes volt, mert ott többen azért összehasonlítottuk, hogy a 18 éves szintet még mindig tökéletesen tudjuk teljesíteni, hanem egyéb olyan új ötleteket kaptunk a testnevelés órák levezetésére, amivel sokkal érdekesebbé tudjuk tenni az elkövetkezendő időszakban a gyerekek oktatását, és bevonva őket is a feladatok végrehajtásába, a feladatok ő általuk történő kitalálásába, és ezt nagyon-nagyon szépen köszönöm.
Mi is köszönjük. Előszeretettel hallgatunk ilyen véleményeket, mondanom sem kell. Tehát ennyi narcizmust azt hiszem, hogy megengedhetnek. Oké.
Akkor ezen a szálon továbbfutva, ha megengedik, nekem egy olyan kérdést tennék föl, mivel ugye a következő évben előttünk áll, hogy 8 évfolyamot meg kell mérnünk, az közel 800 000 mérést jelent, és a Cooper Intézetnek megvan az a komoly tapasztalata, amely alapján ilyen mennyiségű mérést képes volt feldolgozni, kezelni, és ebben segítséget nyújtani a texasi iskolákban. Én azt szeretném kérdezni a kollégáktól, hogy mik voltak azok a legfontosabb tapasztalatok vagy tanulságok, amelyek például Texasban az első mérésekkor felmerültek problémaként. Mire kell felkészülnünk annak érdekében, hogy minél hatékonyabbak és jobbak tudjunk lenni ezen a területen?
Yeah, sure. I think my main recommendation would be to make sure, or along the way, collect data on what schools are doing and how they're reacting to it, get teacher feedback, involve them in the process. So I'm a very big believer of a participatory framework where the teachers can tell us what works best, what doesn't work, and we can learn from them as well as them from us. So we value greatly the participatory framework where we can learn from them. So as you're setting up that database, setting up a surveillance system of the teacher reactions to the test, their training, their experience, their confidence in the test, and being able to see how are they using the test and the results in teaching, because that can then add more value to the data that's collected, and also get their feedback about how it can be improved.
I think when you're dealing with so many physical education teachers, there's going to be a continuum of where they are on professional development and where, how comfortable, as Greg was mentioned, their confidence level in the test, and providing resources to meet them wherever they are on that continuum, and acknowledging that they do exist in different places, I think is very important. As I spoke before lunch about the fitness education process, I believe very strongly in that they ensure that the students know why they're being tested. You know, Apple said it, I think, I saw it on a EdTV, but it was, or TED TV, very much that people buy why you do something, not how or what it is. And so for the whole school community to understand why this is happening and why it's important can ensure success.
I think I have something add would be for you to do the training, we tend to do is, we do have a teacher service training at the beginning of the semester, but then we do the test at the end. You know, we say, okay, we're going to do testing this year, and then you train them at the beginning of the semester, well, when they really do tests, they forgot it. So you have to think about that, you know, the training and the data connection should be very close. And then I think the second part will be different from the traditional national civilian tests. We collect data, you know, have norms. This is really should be integrated with the education. So it's a part of the physical education. You know, it can be done like today do this, next do that. The teacher can be very easy to do during the teaching process, not really spend a lot of time, you know, for that part. I think another thing maybe even for the teachers, I think we really should teach the value of that report. I looked at, you know, the field, physical education. We don't have any formal report except the fitness graph to send to the home. You know, that's the reason really started from the 30 years ago. You know, a report card created by Charlie, bring back by the Dr. Cooper's son to home. Dr. Cooper realized there's a value and started developed. So that Charlie also said that, you know, when he started these things, he just said, well, why the math teacher, science teacher have a report card? We don't. And so he developed the report card. He said the next day the phone is running. So parents really care. So I think that if we pay a lot of attention, teach the teacher, say the value, explain what it is, and bring that report, the sheets back to the parents, and that will also change the, you know, the society, the view on the physical education. And they just play some ball. No, we take care your kids' future health and the current health too. So I think that part is very unique. Really should train students, train teachers realize that value.
We have a question by Professor Hanke.
I'm not disputing the value of everything that we've heard today. And I'm not disputing or criticizing anything about feedback to the student, feedback to the teacher, feedback to the parents, all this wonderful. But I'm asking this question because of something that you mentioned. You said the government will pass a law saying that all students have to be tested. What will the government do with the results? Does the government have access to the results? And will you have, like in some other countries like Great Britain, will these results, not on the individual students, but on the general score, for example, of a class or a school, be in the newspapers? Or will the government or the educational minister of education, do you expect that they draw consequences from this? A positive consequence would be they give more money to the poorer schools. A negative would be they lower the grades of the money that is given to the teachers because they are poor teachers.
Thank you for your question, but I would like to answer again in Hungarian, so with Laci, I guess. Az én perspektívámból nézve azt gondolom, hogy a kormányzat szintjén, vagy az oktatási kormányzat szintjén a legfontosabb annak az adatmennyiségnek a feldolgozása szempontjából az, hogy melyek azok a régiók, melyek azok a területek, és melyek azok az iskolák, amelyeknél az egészségközpontú fitségi állapottal kapcsolatban a legnagyobb problémák vannak. Ők ugyanis potenciális népegészségügyi veszélyeztetettség alatt vannak. Tehát célzott intervenciós programokat, támogatást, célzott segítséget kell nyújtani meggyőződésem szerint azoknak az iskoláknak, területeknek, ahol látjuk, hogy nagyon komoly problémák vannak. Innentől kezdve nem pontszámok alapján, vagy nem melyik iskola a legjobb, meg melyikre a legrosszabb, nem ez a kérdés. Az a kérdés, hogy egy adott iskolában, egy adott területen hány gyerek potenciálisan veszélyeztetett a nem kommunikáló megbetegedésekkel kapcsolatban, a metabolikus szindróma megbetegedésével kapcsolatban, és ezek mozgással, fizikai aktivitással és a testnevelés segítségével megelőzhetők, és ezáltal az élettartam és az egészségtudatosság növelhető. Az én pedagógiai aspektusomból talán ez a legfontosabb elem kormányzati szempontból. Laci?
Az én szempontomból van egy másik aspektusa a kérdésnek. Nem titok, hogy a világon végig söpört egy pénzügyi és gazdasági válság, illetve talán még most is tart, és Magyarország egyike volt azon államoknak ebben az időszakban, ami a leginkább megszenvedte ennek a gazdasági vonatkozásait. A 2010-es kormányprogramban szerepelt először az a kormányzati igény, hogy szükség van egy egységes fittségi tesztre a magyar közoktatásban, és talán ez nem volt véletlen időpont, és azt nem írta elő természetesen az akkori kormányprogram, hogy ennek norma alapú vagy egészségközpontú fittségi tesztnek kell lenni. De akkor, amikor elkészült ez a projekt, akkor azt gondolom, hogy a kormányzat számára is világossá vált, hogy ennek egészségközpontú fittségi tesztnek kell, hogy legyen, hiszen ebből tud később a kormányzat intervenciókat megvalósítani. Ugyanis nem mindegy, hogy hova költjük el a pénzt. Magyarországon nincs annyi pénz a nemzetgazdaságban, az államháztartásban, hogy felelőtlenül, ha úgy tetszik, mérjük meg a tanulók fittségi tesztjét, hogy annak ne legyen gyakorlati haszna. Gyakorlati hasznot akarunk húzni a fittségi tesztelésből a nemzetgazdaság szintjén is, és ez nem történhet meg máshol, mint a nemzetgazdaságon belül az egészségügyi kasszában gyakorlatilag. Tehát, hogy mit tudunk megspórolni az egészségügyi kiadásokon azáltal, hogy egészségesebb generációk nőnek fel. Én azt gondolom, hogy a kormányzat számára a legfontosabb a fittségi teszt, az egységes fittségi teszt bevezetésével az, hogy természetesen anonim módon statisztikai célú felhasználási jogosultságot kapjon ehhez a tesztrendszerhez. Értem ez alatt nyilvánvalóan elsősorban az Oktatási Minisztériumot, és ezen adatok feldolgozását követően intervenciók valósulhassanak meg az iskolákban, hiszen mit fog látni a kormány? Azt fogja látni, hogy ebben és abban az iskolában healthy fitness zónban vannak a gyerekek, a másikban pedig fejlesztés szükséges vagy fokozott fejlesztés zónába került a legtöbb gyerek. Nyilvánvalóan azt fogja látni, hogy egyes iskolákban beavatkozások, intervenciók szükségesek, a másik iskolákban pedig azt gondolom, hogy mindenhol elfér az intervenció, de kisebb számú vagy kevesebb beavatkozás szükséges. A legfontosabb az, hogy lássa a kormány és lássa az állam, hogy hol kell humán erőforrást fejleszteni, hol kell létesítményeket, infrastruktúrát fejleszteni, hol kell el a módszertani segítség, hol kell beavatkozni az iskola egészségfejlesztési programjába, pedagógiai programjába célzottan. Ez az, ami azt gondolom, jelenleg a magyar kormányban már helyettes államtitkári szinten már mindenképpen beépült, és minden állami vezető és szakmai vezető tudja, hogy ennek a tesztrendszernek ez is célja.
But still, my question is what type of intervention you're expecting? You're talking about money, manpower, better facilities and whatnot. So if I was a teacher at that school, I would tell my students, you have to perform poorly. Then we will get more teachers and more facilities. I mean, you know what I mean? So the question is, what type of intervention do you expect? Does it mean if you have a low performance, then health ministry, Minister of Health or Minister of Education will see the need that we have to do something in this district or in this school, and if you're good there, you won't get any support anymore because you're already a top-level school.
A beavatkozások formáját természetesen más és más lehet, de akkor említek néhány példát. Nyilvánvalóan az egyik legégetőbb beavatkozása az, amit Tamás is elmondott, hogy továbbképzéseket szervezzünk a tanárok számára. Egyrészt azért, hogy megismerjék az új fittségi tesztet mélységében, másrészt egyébként módszertani segítségre is van szükségük, hiszen a magyar nemzeti alaptanterv új tartalmai azért, hogy is mondjam, nem feltétlenül mutatnak jelen pillanatban teljes összhangot a felsőoktatási kimeneti követelményekkel. De el kell mondjam, hogy Magyarországon bizony van infrastrukturális gond, nincs elég sportudvar, nincs elég sportpálya, nincs elég tornaterem, tehát bizony van, ahol építenünk kell létesítményeket is. Azt gondolom, hogy van egy nagyon szép és szintén újdonság abban a tekintetben a magyar közoktatásban, hogy olyan szolgáltatások jelennek meg gyakorlatilag az új fittségi teszttel párhuzamosan, amely nagyon jól tudja majd támogatni a testnevelő tanárok tevékenységét. Mire gondolok? Most indul el a magyar közoktatásban egy úgynevezett szaktanácsadói rendszer, ami azt jelenti, hogy a testnevelő tanároknak szolgáltatásként folyamatba építetten egy iskolán kívüli, de az iskolához szorosan kapcsolódó hálózat tud segíteni a mindennapi módszertani problémák megoldásában, illetve elindul ezzel párhuzamosan egy úgynevezett tanfelügyeleti rendszer, vagy szakfelügyeleti rendszer, ami pedig az ellenőrzési oldalát jelenti majd a magyar pedagógus életpályának, ami pedig nyilvánvalóan nyomon tudja követni, hogy azok a fejlesztések, amiket a kormány támogatott, az a szaktanácsadói hálózat, ami a testnevelő tanárok mögött is áll, az hatékonyan fejti ki a tevékenységét, valóban a minőségi testnevelés felé, illetve a minőségi fizikai fittségi mérési rendszerek felé tartunk-e, avagy sem. Én azt gondolom, hogy ezek csak példák, de folytathatnám még, nyilvánvalóan a testnevelési stratégia, amit ebben a projektben szintén kidolgozunk, számos olyan beavatkozást tartalmaz, amely nagy mértékben erősíti a fizikai fittségi mérésnek a sikeres bevezetését, az egészségorientált fittségi mérés sikeres bevezetését Magyarországon.
Might I just add something in the United States? So really there's a new movement right now in the US. Take the teacher school accountable. So it's really teacher effectiveness start to take into the practice already, especially in the science, reading, and other area. Not art, physical education yet, but we just recently have some discussion how we should prepare ourselves. So that really that in some school, they just really say, well, if this school not effective, children don't come to learn. They close school. Chicago closed a lot of school and have a lot of protests, but that's the way start to coming. So I think in the physical education, we got to ready, the way to how we use, which test we use, and how we treat ourselves accountable. What we should measure the physical education teacher effectiveness. I think we got to start to thinking all these tough questions, because general public, they're going to look at and say, well, if your job is to make the kids fit, well, the obesity is so high, why we need you guys? So I think we have to think about that apart. In one state, like South Carolina, they did one time, they used kind of the standard-based evaluation. They really do is they ask a teacher, submit their test, but that's like a little different test. And then they randomly take like 10%. They really look the video and say whether the score is correct or not. And then they look at percentage and how many pass, how many fail. They have some kind of the standard and try to implement that part. So that kind of practice, I think that we should prepare. It will be coming. Thank you.
Just maybe one last word on the subject. Physical education and health receive very little funding in the United States, and practically none from the federal level. And so providing resources to a school in need does not necessarily involve funding or manpower or funding in the way of human resources. It could be looking at schools that are doing well and going and surveying how they're doing, how they are improving, how they're moving the needle without resources, financial resources anyways. It could be just innovative instructional strategies, it could be community partnerships, it could be working with the other faculty and staff on that campus, it could be the administrative support that PE teacher has compared to other schools. And so by, as Greg mentioned earlier, looking at qualitative data as well around factors that might be moving the needle in the right direction at that particular school can be replicated at other schools that are in need.
I want to add something as well. So in the U.S., we've had that same issue about teachers worried about, well, who's going to see my data and is it going to be used to evaluate my teaching? And we have a very strong statement about appropriate and inappropriate uses of fitness testing. So in this regard, we would view this type of testing in Hungary and similar to what we do in the U.S. as curricular evaluation or district-wide evaluation, and we endorse that type of testing. We endorse self-testing to teach kids about fitness. We endorse tracking of fitness for monitoring over time, and all those are built into the software. We specifically don't advocate for using it for teaching or evaluating teachers. And so I think it would help to make a clear statement that the data will not be used and should not be used to evaluate the quality of a teacher, because we all know what would happen in that regard. The teachers would either force the kids to, push too hard, boot camp type PE, or it would, they'd lie and make up data. So we don't want either of those. So what you want is it to be encourage the educational process and to have the assessments be viewed as part of the district or regional evaluation of curriculum changes that are taking place.
I have a good colleague who's actually gotten some national notoriety in my country in a small town that had used a lot of technology. And two things. First of all, he used technology to support his program, which got people excited around town and community involvement. But he could sell it to a school board and a local control that we might have in America, that sells well. So it takes away from the threat of the teacher feeling like their job is in jeopardy if they can defend themselves. Now, the word defense usually implies that they have something to hold up that says that I can prove that I'm valued. I always look at assessment. It's a good thing to have. We've said many times, data drives decisions. It definitely is going to drive decisions at a school board level if that's who's evaluating you. And of course, hiring and firing might be somebody who's more local. But I think your value is going to be enhanced by assessment. But I do want to say, because I teach teachers, and I'm a person I don't do necessarily assessment in physical education, but they're always questioning whether we should be doing fitness testing. And they think, of course, performance, and I remind them that no, FitnessGram is criterion-based. It's not used for individual, in this case, teacher evaluation. It states in the manual. So just take it to your school board. This is what you're supposed to be doing. You're following the protocol, and of course, I think the threats go away. So I think each teacher has to prepare themselves. They're very resilient to. In my culture, for 30 years, we've been evaluated, so it's not an overnight concern. But the point being is that they always know that they have to be very good communicators with their administration. They have to have data, at least evaluative data from the kids, so if they do ask the question. And of course, that said, I think assessment is enhancing their ability to do their job, particularly if it has an educational component.
Szeretnék hozzátenni egy kiegészítést még hozzá, csatlakozva Greg hozzászólásához még hozzá. Ugye sokan félnek tőle, és ez mindig benne van egy potenciális veszélyérzet bennünk testnevelőkben, vagy akik testnevelés területén dolgoznak, hogy akkor most a NETFIT-tel majd vissza fogják ellenőrizni az én munkámat, és hogyha ott nekem sok vörös zónás, meg sárga zónás gyerekem van, akkor majd, hogyha a portfóliómat be kell adnom, és majd jön az ellenőrzés a központból, akkor majd engem el fognak marasztalni, és ennek lesznek konzekvenciái, és így tovább. A NETFIT könyvnek a módszertani bevezetőjében azt hiszem, hogy próbáltuk világosan rögzíteni, és ezt most megerősítették az amerikai kollégáink is, hogy ez a tesztrendszer nem ezt a célt szolgálja elsősorban, sőt olyannyira nem, hogy a fitségi állapotnak a változására és elsősorban annak a szintjére nagyon sok összetevő, befolyásoló tényező. Nem kizárólag azon múlik, sőt, talán a legkevésbé azon múlik, hogy ezt azért nem mondom, de Kismértékben járul hozzá a fitségi állapothoz az, hogy ki mennyit mozog. Lehet, hogy van olyan sok gyerek, aki rengeteget mozog, és még sincs magas fitségi állapota. És az is lehet, hogy van olyan gyerek, aki alig mozog valamit, de nagyon magas fizikai állapota van a genetikai adottságai, érési, növekedési potenciája okán. Testnevelőként fogtok találkozni olyannal, és lesz olyan iskola, régió, ami tele lesz sárga és vöröszónás, és lesz olyan iskola, ahol egyetlen egy vöröszónás gyereket sem fogunk találni. A feladat az, hogy minél több sárga és piroszónás gyereket megpróbáljunk előmozdítani a zöld zónába, és segítsük őket annak érdekében, hogy fejlődni tudjanak ezen a területen, és nem az a cél, sőt, kifejezetten ellenjavalt például a pedagógusok ilyen irányú minősítése, hiszen számos összetevő befolyásolja. Amit én meg tudok mutatni például az, hogy nézd meg, 2016-ban volt a 5. osztályomban 35% piroszónás gyerek, és nézd meg, most 2017 vége van, és 23% lett az, aki a piroszónában van. És én ezt csináltam, ezt a folyamatot, és talán ez egy visszajelzés abban, hogy jól csináltam valamit a testnevelés óráimon. Szóval sok összetevős a dolog. Én azt kérem mindannyiótoktól, hogy olvassátok a NETFIT kézikönyvet, és legyetek tisztában azzal, hogy pontosan mire érdemes, és mire lehet használni ezt a rendszert, és mire nem lehet használni ezt a rendszert.
Igen, és ha már itt tartunk a használata a rendszernek. Itt elhangzott, hogy a testnevelő tanár és a diákok közötti kommunikációnak, a visszajelentésnek egy erős eszköze, hiszen mindenkinek személyre szóló adatlapot adunk. De ugyanakkor nem szabad elfelejteni, hogy ugyanakkor a szülők felé is kommunikál a testnevelő. Tehát ez egy újabb aspektus, ami segíti. Ha azt nézzük, hogy esetleg egy régió vagy egy város irányítása szempontjából vizsgálja a különböző iskolák, vagy régiók, vagy területek, vagy életkorok, vagy bármi alapján az egészségi állapotot, szintén egy újabb felhasználása. Tehát azt hiszem, hogy azt kell kihangsúlyoznunk, hogy a felelősségteljes felhasználása, függetlenül attól a céltól, hogy éppen mi az, amit vizsgálunk az egészség összetevőkön túl, vagy ha az egészségi zónában vagyunk-e, az nagyon sokféle lehet. És az egész nagy képből próbáljunk meg valami olyan tanulságot levonni, ami hasznosítható gyakorlati szinten is, és mondjuk a rendszer szintjén is. Okay, I'm turning back. Ever since you mentioned, Raimo, that there are different parts or different health contents one has, I wanted to ask that, what do you think should be or could be measurable within school physical education circumstances, for example, bone health or what is the relevance?
Yeah, I see that there are two parts, sounds like coming, or at least research. One will be the bone health. And I think there are some US researchers already collect data and show that, that you have kids have to jump 100 times each day to get that bone impact. And so in fact, it's a scary picture in Beijing. Just a few weeks ago, I was there. And 5th grade kids, their bone is like 55 years old, and it's terrible. And some kids just, today's kids, they just, a little bit of activity, they've broken their bones. So they're very, very weak, and they just don't have enough that impact. I mean, nutrition-wise is okay. So today's kids just don't have enough.
So practically, they did not jump enough.
Exactly.
While they are getting older.
Yeah. So that would be the crisis when, especially the females. And I think that, after 50, somewhere after menstruation stop, then there'll be disaster to that population, So I think the bone is one of the things. Another part, there's a lot of new research about the cognitive aspect, cognitive benefit, mental health. And I'll see that that two variable may be more interesting to us to aid additional, we call like a measurement, people call like kind of cross-validation. So we get a cutoff score. This month of the activity, the sit-up test or the running is good to vascular function. But what about to the bone? Is that enough? So we need to bring the additional health outcome variables, start to look at the cross relationship. So that's, I see, the research needed.
Greg?
I was just going to add something that we haven't really talked about yet, but it relates to the health issue, is the popularity of the hand grip and the long jump as other indicators. They historically haven't been in FitnessGram, but our advisory board is moving towards that, including those tests as well because of the Institute of Medicine recommendations, and I know they're popular in Europe. But one issue about the link to health that I think is worth bringing up is the education process that I think we have to go through to teach teachers and children what that really means. So it's not the strength of your hand that really matters, it's a proxy of your overall body strength. And so it's a very good and reliable test, and it's a good indicator, but I think we have to be careful to teach kids that we don't want kids to just be squeezing tennis balls to get stronger so that their score is better. That's not the goal. The goal is to have overall muscular fitness, and then the proxy measure of the hand grip would indicate or capture that. And the same, I think, is true with long jump or vertical jump would be, they're indicators of power, and they capture a really good indicator of that child's power and health-related fitness, but it's not necessarily how far you can jump that relates to health. And so the other tests all have a little bit stronger link that are educationally sound, and I think we have to be careful how we describe each test to educate both parents and kids and teachers.
Én szeretnék itt a Greghez csatlakozni egy pillanatra, ami előkerült egy fontos probléma, amire már korábban volt utalás, még pedig ugye a gyakorlat irányából állandó kérdésként merül föl, hogy jó, de mennyi ideig tart ezt, te úristen, mire én az összes gyereket megmérem, és ez a sok teszt, és ezzel úristen. Ugye a mi gondolatmenetünkben és a NETFIT gondolatmenetében a NETFIT az nem csak egy mérés, az nem csak egy tesztelési helyzet, egy teszteredmény, hanem egy fittségoktatási folyamatnak a része. És hogyha én ebből az aspektusból vizsgálom, ahol nekem meg kell tanítanom a gyereknek, érzékenyé kell tennem, hogy a fittségi állapot miért fontos az egészség szempontjából, mit jelent az egyes fittségi komponenseknek a jelentése, mit jelent az, miért fontos az, hogy a megfelelő erőszint legyen, például a csontegészség szempontjából, miért fontos az, hogy megfelelő állóképességem legyen a kardiovaszkuláris egészség szempontjából, hogyan tudom azt fejleszteni, hogyan tudok magamnak fejlesztő programot felépíteni, hogy ez javuljon, ne adj Isten. Ebben a kontextusban azt hiszem, hogy az a 5-6 óra, amely a NETFIT felmérésére általunk javasolt óramennyiség osztályszinten, ebben a kontextusban ezt azt gondolom, hogy ez ott van a helye konkrétan az egyéneknek a testnevelési tanmenetében és tantervében, mint tervezett tananyag. Nem kizárólag, mint egy mérési rendszer, hanem mint tananyag. És ebből a szempontból azt hiszem, hogy igenis helye van, és fontos ezzel a kérdéssel foglalkoznunk.
Kevin, I believe you had something to say.
Well, I was just going to point out, I'm an exercise physiologist, and I have a very good laboratory, actually, and I direct a youth fitness, so I can optimally bring kids to the laboratory, but the practical sense is how many tests am I able to get them, how often can I get them there, and of course, what can I do with the measurements. I'm just going to weigh in on the grip strength. We've done grip strength for many, many years in adults. The physicians, clinicians have done it as a measure, in this case a surrogate measure, and it's been very useful. I think the practical sense is that the optimal would be, of course, as they've done in our Represent study, bring them in the laboratory, max VO2, get them strength measure, get all those things, but it's not practical. The dissemination of that is not practical, and of course it would take forever to get everybody into the laboratory. I always think that muscle strength, or muscle fitness is a more appropriate term, is a really interesting new variable I think that we have to start to understand. Bone is remodeled based on how much muscle pulls on bone, so it's not always about the weight of the body on the legs, it's how much they're pulling and pushing on the arms too. So I think the reality is I would like to see more data on the usefulness of muscle fitness, and it's both the multi-tests as the criterion maybe, and then of course with the grip strength for what, for the kids, how much does that single test do? So I hopefully we develop more understanding of the criterion for muscle fitness, its association with more advanced testing, and of course, if there's if we even minimize the strength to a single grip, is that an advantage for a time management issue?
You mentioned that we have to understand muscle and bone components. Greg mentioned that they have to understand that what does it mean to an overall strength fitness that you have this arm test. Tommy mentioned that it's a part of the subject. So, and the more we talk about the more we get back to what we had yesterday about quality physical education, that you have to have this holistic approach to put the data for the kids in a context which they can understand. And I believe that Greg was who said that the responsibility, make it understandable for them and feel the responsibility of their own health. So that leads to my question, which is the attitude part. You mentioned, Dr. Zhu, that the cognitive health is a question that should be developed in the next years. What do you think about what is the best method right now for measuring and the attitude, the willingness to be physically active in the adulthood, and what are the tendencies? What possible solutions do we have to make the kids physically active adults?
Kevin, you want to take one?
It's a big question. I know when I first started working at the district level, I used to throw a statistic out that, and it was accurate at the time, but that goes back some years, but it was that only 3% of the adults in the U.S. over the age of 25 maintain, any type of physical activity through sport. And so it's very much about teaching the habits for physical activity and fitness that perhaps do not necessarily parlay with a team sport. It's the individual sports and providing access and opportunities to students through a spectrum of different things that they can interact with. And I think that as we broaden that scope of educating, that even going for a brisk walk 3 times a day, that's really that, or most days of the week, that is enough to attain and maintain appropriate health levels, at least aerobic capacity levels. And so taking away some of these notions that I have to be involved in competitive sports or extreme sports or the 2-hour workouts a day. I mean, it doesn't take that to be physically healthy. And so I think public perception a lot and taking that to the students. And I think that the advent of social media and different things like that can really work with us in that regard.
And then make a difference, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Zhu?
Yeah, I think that in general, the research aspect, attitude research has a lot, like 70s, but the correlation between the attitude and behavior is kind of low. If you ask, say, is the physical activity important? Everyone right hand. Do you do it? Few people. Why? No time. So, that's kind of it's interesting when I go to lectures around the world, different place, it's the same, no time. So they didn't really thinking that physical activity is that important. So the U.S. right now really moved from the behavior psychological model based intervention to the socio-ecological model. Really have to change the environment. Policy, environment sounds like 2 key words right now. When you apply to real situation, I think for kids, parents is very important. Parents, their the participation, involvement is very important. For school, quite often our observation, the research show is really the principal. That principle is very critical. If the principal want to do something, and can be done. And a good example, like one school, like pull-ups, and the principal really love the pull-ups. So every school, classroom have a bar, and so kids really just do the pull-ups. Then they have a lot of competition with parents coming, and the parents is funny too. They said, "Well, I don't have time to hold the kids. When they have a teenage, they don't want parents to hold them. So parents come to help, And all the kids can do 20 some pull-ups. Well, the other school they can do too. And then the national TV coming, and so kids really feel very good about it, and so very positive the way. So I think that it's really you have to really working on it, create that kind of environment. But I think from the government point of view, that policy things become very important. Really, that the U.S. learned really from the smoking. The reduction is really that policy. So you cannot smoke. The U.S. right now, like our community, a university, you cannot really smoke. At first, when I was there, you can only smoke outside the building, 15 meters from the building. But that is also very, the good policy. We have like 20 degree, during the winter time. You think about that. The guy just in the middle of two buildings, smoker there, everyone passes around and say, this guy, So really give a high pressure on them. That kind of policy really help. And I think that, we have to, I guess, combine all attitude, behavior, environment, things together.
I've spent about, I don't know, I think I came out of a health promotion model. I know Greg is much more versed in that, so he can probably verse more of the behavioral models. But, I'm to the point in my career that I want to go take a legislature to lunch. And in this case, I want to get in that he or she's ear and say, listen, we got to change policy. Because I've seen the one-on-one, and it works to individuals, okay. Try to do some family intervention, school-based programming, community involvement, but I think the policy-driven decisions, and of course to take it that level is so critical. And I think it was made yesterday in the comments when we were dealing with the European Union policies and some of those things. From a local level, take your legislature, your local lawmaker to lunch and get in their ear and talk to them about it, because I think it's the only way we're really going to make change. And a good example is smoking in American culture, and there's some other things, seatbelt use, and all those things that we thought 30 years ago, it will never change. So it's clear it can make some changes.
It seems like we have the data we need to convince anyone, or you said, Dr. Zhu mentioned the principles. You said the government and the politicians, decision makers. From a very average man's point of view, this data should be enough to make a rational decision. What do you think should be the most effective with politicians, except from the rational stuff? I know it's not an elegant question, but maybe we can figure out something together to be effective.
Yeah, before I kind of address that one, I think I'd like to also point out that we talk of policy. I think Hungary maybe set an example for worldwide. Because you guys just, when they come, like less than 2 years ago, first meeting, no one really thinking that it can be done in such short time. They get it done, and we just talk about that. You get a team and a government team. A lot of them have a sports background, push very hard. I mean, this is just a good example. I think later on, 20 years later, maybe we can see, well, Hungary set a good example. Really not learn from us. We learn from you guys. Say, how can you make it done? I think that really we like to learn a lot. Say how this can be done, then we can move to another country. And it really can be moved worldwide. And the bottom line is help the kids. So that's one. And go back to your ones. I think that to the politician, to the government, very important thing is connecting with the economics. So if you think about that, the no fit the kid, the person. I mean, when I talk to some people in the company, they all say, this is this few people who get a heart attack, who do the surgery, who went to the hospital all the time. This is 20 people, 10% people spend 90, 100 or 80, 90% of our insurance money. So that low group, really is the group we should be working on. And so it's really also the company show that you invest $1 and you get $3 back people don't get sick, they work more efficient. So I think somewhere next thing we need to really do is say, anytime we get invest the money, we get the return. So the government will be happy. And because the US is really scary picture, about 40% right now, our GPT go to the health care. And it's a really big problem. And according to this trend, hospital getting bigger, people spend a lot of money, so that I think that is one of the things, cost effectiveness, be building.
I was just going to build on that a little bit more. So the work site, I think, example works for adults, that adult work site programs have an incentive to reduce healthcare costs in employees, but I think schools have the incentive of having healthy and active kids to perform better in schools. And I agree with Waymo that the model here of having required daily PE is the envy of every other country to try to get there. So holding on to that and using that as an example is a very powerful thing. In the United States, there's one state that has a law that says every kid has PE every day, and they get a lot of visibility for it. In Hungary, you'll get that same visibility internationally for being the only country that would have a mandate for that, and you'll see the benefits, and the schools will start seeing the benefits of the active kids performing better in school and less disruption in class time, better attendance, as we've talked about. So I think the link of a healthy school is analogous to a healthy work site. The other thing I would add, though, is the clinical link. We're working now to try to get FitnessGram data linked to the electronic medical record so that physicians can then counsel parents about raising healthy children, and they would know the child's BMI or fitness score when they do a well child visit. So linking with the clinical community is a really powerful opportunity.
I would say, not that I've been a politician and I don't know many, but I believe in telling a story. I think that a story from their backyard, from one of their constituents, something that they could carry forward. And if you want their support, you need to prepare them to lobby for you. And one of the best ways to do that is through storytelling. And so the NETFIT story is a wonderful story, but and the things that you all have mentioned as well are very important. But a politician, to some extent might be a lay person when it comes to data and academic performance or different things like that. And so they can tell your story through maybe one individual child that had a really impactful experience with understanding their data, or one school that really turned things around because of what they did with their data. And so those types of stories, I think, would help somebody that maybe doesn't speak our language as fluently.
Well, I also want to add one thing, maybe especially to the Hungary researchers. I think that we get an excellent start, and we also have kind of baseline data already. You need to keep connect data, and then if 5 years later, and I think that even right now your data, we can connect with the international data to see where's the rank of the Hungary kids. And if the 5 years later say, now we are ranked, middle somewhere, I think Europe in general is the front. But if you say suddenly we are the number 2, number 1, now in the world, I think a politician will be happy, right? And that will be very, very powerful things to support. The database, the evidence is very important.
Yeah, the power of reframing facts is always huge. We're getting towards the end of our discussion today, and I have a question for you, and I would like to answer you, all of you. If you had 2 tests, what will it be? In other phrases, what is your favorite 2 tests in terms of health responsibility and future-oriented thinking in schools, in public schools or schools, physical education?
I think that PACER for sure. That's the test. Kids like it and it's good, very supported. And then somewhere I think that I like the we don't have the very good one yet for some strength test. I think the strength is another thing. Is worldwide is declining. It's very, very important to health. So push-ups maybe too. So push-ups and pacer.
Okay, Kevin.
I'll say pacer because I already said I like that, but I'll throw in waist circumference because I think there's some vertibility, and then of course you could say kids grow, and they do, but they don't always grow around the waist quite like that. So they grow long and they grow big, but they don't always grow wide, and so I think it'd be a good indicator of change, possibly a health risk.
Because those fitness measures have been covered, I'll put a plug in for physical activity assessments and then another physical activity assessment is my two. But yeah, I believe strongly in the focus
It's
on
an
the
elegant move.
I'll put in 2 votes. But I believe the kids have a greater chance of seeing success in physical activity. Teachers have a better chance of having an impact on, as we quantify activity. So even what we talked about, sort of the continuum from awareness to behavior or attitude to activity to fitness to health. It's a long continuum, and the earlier we can assess those things, the more we can be prescriptive about identifying the kids at risk. So fitness is kind of a late outcome, and ideally you'd want to identify children's home environment or their physical activity behavior that may predispose them to negative health outcomes. So I guess that's another outcome that, parent behavior could be an important one.
Those are some interesting options.
Greg stole a little bit of my thunder here.
Move back farther.
I was gonna go towards. I think understanding and assessing for both interpersonally and at the group level, the physical activity and dietary behaviors, because those are the 2 things that, when modeled appropriately, can really change behaviors and create those healthy habits for a lifetime.
Oké, én laikusként fogok megszólalni ebben a kérdésben, de nekem mindenképpen azok a tesztek tetszenek a leginkább ebben a típusú elképzelésben, amelyek mindenképpen motiváló tanulási környezetet is jelentenek a tanulók számára. Ha a NETFIT-ből vagy a FitnessGramből indulok ki, akkor nekem mindenképpen a pacer, tehát az ingafutás, illetve a curl up, tehát az ütemezett hasizom gyakorlata az, ami azt gondolom, hogy a korábbi évek gyakorlatához képest Magyarországon is komoly újdonságot és komoly motivációs tényezőt jelent a gyerekeknek.
A fitségi tesztek szempontjából az én kedvencem, ugyancsak valószínűleg ebben sokan azonosak vagyunk, az ingafutás, a pacer teszt az, ami az egyik kedvencem, illetve ugyancsak egyetértve Greggel én az aktivitás mérésben, a mozgásos viselkedés mérésben hiszek nagyon, és a pedométerek, a lépésszámlálók azok, amik erre kiváló és objektív és olcsó testnevelés során is alkalmazható kiváló lehetőséget teremtenek, ami nagyon-nagyon motiváló lehet a gyerekek számára is, és független a genetikai hátterüktől.
Sorry that first I should politically correct. I should say FitnessGram, NETFIT.
Okay. Kérdezem a közönséget, van-e bárkinek kérdése? Szeretne bárki hozzáfűzni valamit az elhangzottakhoz? Do you have anything to add what just we heard? Do you have, Erkut?
Well, I'd like to add a couple of things. Probably you already know by research, if we are not taught PE, children actively participating in PE and sports before 10 years old, those kids, then they are going to become 25 years old, so they have less chance of 10% of participating in activities and having active life. So early intervention is very important for children. We know you probably already know the book Moving Children by George Graham, and it's a very good book, and there are a lot of research there. Also, we know that if children actively, appropriately, developmentally appropriate physical activities, if they participate, their performance improves in maths and reading too. So it helps other classes too. So we know this by research. My concern is a bit testing tests for kids, but not kids for tests. So we need to have a holistic approach, and everything is not the tests. So But of course, tests are very important related to goal settings. We already know goal settings theory, and we need to know the objective. We need to have the objective knowledge and to set goals. It's definitely important. But tests for kids. Kids are not for the tests. That's my comment I'd like to make. So probably you know more research and you can give us more information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, agree that the general comment, it's like Greg said, I think, for the hand grips test, we don't really mean that kids should just do the hand grips. Really encourage the physical activity, do the overall strength, then, get on their overall growth. The another side is, I think there will be also aspect that even in the fitness gram, I think there's a philosophy say we don't test the younger kids. It's just really, they are supposed to just do the physical activity. If you look at the age range of fitness gram, start from a year 8. Yeah, so it's the younger ones, we don't really say we want to test them. But the other side will be the US too will be say for the early age kids, we should encourage them more motor movement development tests. In fact, we did just collect a big data sets in summer, just the motor development in China. And but it's a scary picture too. You'll find that sometimes standardized tests will give you some information. You compare the 20 years ago's information. You find that today's kids, in the city in China, they have very little opportunity to the old days natural activities. The overall the motor function is really declined. And so I think that the standardized test has the role for us researchers know what's going on in the field. So I think that we really should look at the test in a different perspective.
I just make the point that also ethical guidelines we need to follow for testing.
Sure.
By American Psychological Association, probably US, I don't know, other countries, but there is ethical guidelines testing the children too.
Yeah,
I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, that's the one, like you do TGMD, you're supposed to have certain training. You have to at least a bachelor degree to be able to do it. So, sure.
So it probably gives us comfort that we couldn't solve the fitness problem in 90 minutes. So we have some chance to have this discussion or continue discussion later on some conference probably. Nagyon köszönjük mindenkinek a részvételt. Thank you for your part and
Thank you very much.